Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tim Quigg, who's going to make an introduction for our Inventor of the Year.
I think Andy deserves some recognition simply by being able to pronounce all of the titles of those patents that were issued. Well done. I've known Russ Taylor for more than 20 years. I actually was looking at some pictures the other day that had both Russ and me in the picture from back in the 1990s. There was a much younger version of me in the picture, but somehow or another Russ looked exactly the same now as he did then. I don't know exactly how he does this, but he manages to do that pretty well. Well, Russ has accomplished a lot since he completed his PhD work here at UNC in 1994. He also got his MS and his BS from UNC as well. Russ's thesis was entitled "The Nanomanipulator, a Virtual Reality Interface to the Scanning Tunneling Microscope." Now, did I mention that Russ did his PhD work under Fred Brooks? That's the Fred Brooks who founded the UNC Computer Science Department, the National Medal of Technology and Turing Award winner, and the head of the IBM System 360 project. Fred once said to me that Russ was a computer charmer, that he had this ability to make computers do things that nobody else could do, and quite frankly, that most people didn't even think computers were able to do. Well, many of you in this room that have worked with Russ know exactly what Fred was talking about, because you've had the great privilege of seeing him work his magic over the years. Let me cover a few of the basics about Russ. He's a research professor with a joint appointment in the departments of computer science, physics and astronomy, and the curriculum on applied sciences and engineering. He's named on 19 different invention disclosures at UNC and 14 different patent applications. His patents have been licensed to Siemens, to Nanomanipulator Inc., to Megawatt Solar Inc., and to Rheomics Inc. These last three companies are startups that he was involved in co-founding. Rheomics with Rich Superfine and Ricky Sparrow, who are here in the front row. Russ was VP of Systems for a few years at that startup. Megawatt Solar with Chuck Evans and Chris Clemens. He was VP of Systems Engineering there for a while. And then with Nanomanipulator with Nick England, where Russ served as chairman of the board. Well, in addition to those things, Russ directs the Biomedical Image Analysis Supercomputer, which is an NIH-funded resource for all NIH-funded researchers on campus. He's co-director of the Computer Integrated Systems for Microscopy and Manipulation, which is another NIH resource. It consists of a team of physicists, chemists, and computer scientists working together to develop improved interfaces, visualization and analysis tools for scanned probe and fluorescence microscopes. I'm getting there, but the list is long with Russ. He's also director of the computer science team for the UNC Nanoscale Science Research Group, which is a team of physicists, chemists, gene therapists, biologists, library scientists, perceptual psychologists, and computer scientists that work together to develop improved interfaces for second probe microscopy. Somewhere along the way, Russ finds the time to teach a course as well. He's been doing it every spring for a long time in visualization in the sciences, and that's aimed at both computer scientists and natural scientists. In addition, he manages to find time to be actively involved in the Beacons on the Hill, UNC's Christian faculty group. He's an active member of his local. He serves on the board of directors of Pharaoh's Daughter, a nonprofit organization which is committed to providing childcare and training and transitional housing for women who have children while in prison. He gives numerous talks to a wide range of non-scientific groups, including, a while back, to the UNC College for Seniors lecture series. He helps the computer science department every year with the Maze Day program, which is involved with reaching out to blind school children throughout North Carolina. And he's been happily married for 24 and a half years to Michelle, who is a big part of the School of Information and Library Science on campus. So we're glad that she's here celebrating with Russ tonight. Well, I'll close my words of introduction simply by referencing something that I found on the internet when I Googled Russ last night. It said Russ Taylor, one of the great faculty, will be presenting at the Teen Science Cafe tonight at Moorhead Auditorium. That was a few years ago. But it is indeed my great honor to introduce to you truly one of UNC's great faculty members and a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Russ Taylor, the 2014 UNC Inventor of the Year.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Dr. Johns. Thank you, the selection committee, for this honor, and for giving me the chance to talk with you this evening about some of the enterprises I've been involved with as I've been here at UNC. I'd like to start with two quotes that describe the first lesson that I learned kind of along this path. I was privileged to have Fred Brooks as my PhD advisor, and his approach to building tools for collaborators that actually solve their problems led me to develop a number of tools that were actually usable and therefore help form companies and open source software that's being used around the world. But even when you're not specifically looking, sometimes life brings you problems that need solving. And if you want to and you choose to, you can divert a little bit of time from studying esoteric, interesting problems and actually try to solve practical, real-world problems. Solutions to actual problems that actual people have. And this has also led to the creation of a company. First, I want to thank Shelley, who's my partner in crime, and my wife of nearly 25 years. She's been with me through all of what I'm about to describe. I know sometimes she felt like a widow as I was busy doing two jobs for the last several years. She also took the photos that we're going to see in between topics. They'll kind of form a kind of a sorbet to try to cleanse the palate in between topics. And they'll give something for those of you who are dragged by your spouse to look at that's interesting during this talk. She taught me the second lesson, which is the secret to taking really great photos is to have a good eye and take a lot of photos. And so the kind of application to business is straightforward. If you want some great ideas, have a lot of ideas and just keep the best ones. When I was a graduate student, I was looking for a dissertation topic. Stan Williams and Warren Robinette provided one for me. They wanted to combine nanotechnology and virtual reality to make a system where a scientist could go in and touch atoms and move molecules around by hand. I couldn't imagine a better dissertation topic to work on, right? The result was a nanomanipulator system that was basically a virtual reality interface to scan probe microscopes that let scientists go in, smash viruses, cut DNA, stack up carbon nanotubes, and do science kind of concentrating on what they were doing instead of programming some strange Etch-a-Sketch display. We tried to give the nanomanipulator system away as open source software, and several graduate students got to travel overseas to kind of install it in different labs, but most chemists and biologists wanted something that they could actually buy that would get support and training, and if it broke, they could call somebody on the phone. And so we ended up making it a company. Nick England formed Third Tech, and Aaron Helzer went to basically build, install, and support the nanomanipulator system. So we got an R&D Top 100 award and sold enough systems to pay the employees, give UNC some royalties, and break even through the end of last year, where we ceased operations and made the code open source software again. And so this is several of the students, faculty, and staff who were involved with the system development, and Mike Falvo using the system to push around carbon nanotubes. As Tim mentioned, I teach a course called Visualization in the Sciences every year, and this course acts as a test bed for potential new collaborators. And so one day, John Clark showed up, and he had a very simple question. He wanted Superman X-ray vision, right? He wanted to be able to look at the bones and see the ball and remove the thing, and see the socket and remove the ball automatically. Solving this wasn't completely simple, and was the dissertation work of David Borland, It turns out for this system, it wasn't really feasible to go and make a company, and so instead we licensed the patents to Siemens. And so David went to Siemens Research and implemented over the summer his kind of superpower into their software there. And this basically covered the patent costs and provided a couple tens of thousands of dollars of licensing fees. I have to ask Chris Clemens to tell the story about how he and Dan Gregory thought of the idea of working together to form new power systems as they were on the way to help his brother as a result of Hurricane Katrina. And when they got back, they talked Chuck Evans and me into joining them in this project. So our idea was to develop inexpensive, concentrated solar photovoltaic systems. We were joined by both local angel investors and some foreign VC partners. And we made a several-year run at trying to make inexpensive, reliable systems. We assembled an amazing team at a plant near Hillsborough, where everyone participated in design contests, and also provided feedback. It was a stupendously great place to work. Ricky was there sometime as well. So the image shown here is our alpha installation in Caswell County. There's a sign at our mechanics that says, "Good, fast, and cheap, pick any two." Right? And so Megawatt Solar was building inexpensive, reliable systems, and it took us longer than we thought it was going to do. In fact, it took us longer than the investors wanted it to happen and longer than the energy crisis lasted. Right? And so after about $20 million in capital, we ceased operations and have gone into hibernation. So this venture didn't particularly involve UNC, except that 3 of the 4 founders were from UNC. But nonetheless, we got a lot of help from the Office of Technology Development and from others advising us from around campus. Most recently, Rheomics is a company that spun off the NIH National Research Resource that Rich Superfine and I lead. Rich and Ricky Spiro launched the venture course in the business school. And then together the 3 of us, along with Suresh Balu, founded the company back in 2010. Can't believe it's been that long. We tried 2 different ideas, which failed fast, right? And then we switched to our current focus on developing magnetic nickel microrods that by moving in a blood clot can sense the stiffness of the clot over time and how it forms and how it lyses. We're joined by Jay Fisher, who's perfecting the construction of the post arrays, and by our new CEO, Michael Murphy. Right? We're in the middle right now of raising money, so if you're a qualified investor and you want to be in the next great biotech spin out from UNC, talk to them before leaving tonight. We've got a term sheet and we're ready to sign people. For my day job, I work in the same great team of faculty, students, and staff who developed the nanomanipulator system. And we continue to put out open source software that's used by the biomedical community around the US and around the world. These are your tax dollars at work. So thank you. One of the things I've learned, both from others and from personal experience, is that things take longer than I think they should. Even if I'm only counting the time on the task, not that I have to go do other things as well. For me, the multiplier is a factor of 3, right? And this matches what Fred Brooks reports in the Mythical Man Month for how long it takes to go from a program to a program product. There's nothing like comparing an empirical measurement to actual specific prediction to bring this home to me. So when I went to work for Disney as a consultant to develop a device driver, I quoted them a certain number of hours it was going to take, and when I looked at the end, it was 3 times as long as I quoted, and so I've remembered this ever since. This factor also applied at a larger scale, kind of how long we thought it was going to take to do the megawatt solar installation, and how long it actually took was about a factor of 3, right? So I used to think that annual reports were tough to write for grant proposals when I hadn't done the work that I hoped that we had done. But when you've hired 10 people and you have to tell the investors you haven't met the milestones and they have to tell you they're not going to fund your 10 people, it's a whole different level of hurt, right? And so it's really important to make accurate predictions, and so you should know your multiplier and you should use your multiplier. But I like to do it by learning vicariously whenever I can. And I've had the benefit of a lot of good advice during this process. When we were getting ready to access some investment capital to Megawatt Solar, Dan Gregory basically gave this advice to the founders: stick together, negotiate as a team. Sometimes the investors will try to split off one or two of the founders and provide a deal that's to the benefit of them and not so much to the other people. Fortunately, we had enough trust within that group that we were able to make it through several rounds of this all together as a team. When we started the Nanonuclear Incorporated, Nick England had two excellent pieces of advice, among the other things that he brought with us. The first was to figure out who would get how much of the proceeds at the beginning before there were any actual proceeds to fight over, right? It's way easier to split potential future gains than actual present gains. And the second was to think about this company not as a big pile of money coming our way, but rather as a way to get our technology out of the lab, into the world, into the hands of actual users. This really set my perspective in a good way, and we succeeded at doing that with his help. Oops. Let me go. All right, so I've talked some about the good things and the excitement of starting companies, but I also want to point out some of the costs, so you can kind of make an informed decision about, is this something that you want to get into and doing. Most things that are worth doing have a cost, and starting businesses is no exception. The cost is not all monetary. So remember the first lesson? To get great ideas, you have to have a lot of ideas. So this was another idea that Shelley and I had, right? And so it was awesome. So the provisional patent application talks about how you can separate the two forms of heat. One is electromagnetic energy, and the other is kind of motion, thermal motion of atoms. So that you can recirculate the heat that was lost in the first exchange and do a much better job at converting the rest of the energy into electricity. It was incredibly inexpensive to make, and it was going to solve the world's energy problems. Awesome. Only had one teensy-weensy little problem. Turns out it violates the second law of thermodynamics. The universe conspires to keep you from doing things like that. So, but finding this out involved doing calculations, computer simulations, and developing a prototype that ultimately failed. And be prepared for this, and don't be surprised when you go start your company. Rheomics had a similar thing. We had two ideas that are on the side now while we pursue the third one. Another cost is that somebody gets sacrificed, or at least their time gets sacrificed. So Fred Brooke points out that the efficient way to kind of do technology transfer is in the head of the person who goes to the company to teach them how to do this new thing. For each of the cases I've described, somebody ended up going full-time, and sometimes several of us additionally went part-time. For the nanomanipulator, Nick England left his research faculty position to go form Third Tech, invested his own money in that as well. And then Aaron Helzer, who had just graduated, went there to build, sell, and support the commercial nanonuclear system. For Interspace, David Borland went to Siemens for the summer to implement his technique inside their software. And for Megawatt Solar and Rheomics, one of the founders went full-time. So Dan Gregory went full-time for Megawatt Solar, and Ricky Spiro has gone full-time for Rheomics, and the other of us basically work in our spare time, which really means family time. Time is a zero-sum game. Papers versus patents. Research versus development. Intellectual engagement is a zero-sum game. Solving theoretical problems versus solving practical problems. I've actually had good support for the time part of this, using my service mission at UNC to be able to support this efforts. The new Department of Applied Physical Sciences is building this into their organizing documents, realizing that if the faculty members are going to really engage in supporting companies and producing things, it's going to necessarily reduce the publications that they are able to do, but it has the benefits to the people of North Carolina. But when we submitted the competitive renewal for NIH research grant, the reviewers' main concerns, one of them was the lack of innovation in my parts of the grant. And for them, innovation means publications, right? And so they basically questioned whether I was focusing too much on working with companies and not enough on research. So most importantly, you need to decide what it is that makes you get up in the morning and want to go work, right? Is it kind of coming up with new knowledge, new fundamental theories that you can publish in journals, or is it also solving practical problems that help real-world needs? As you can tell, I tend to ask what can possibly go wrong and then work to keep that from happening, right? If it had been left up to me, none of these enterprises would have gotten off the ground because I would be worrying about how do we not worry about this. You need somebody with a vision of here's how great this can be, let's go do it, right? I've been blessed to be surrounded by a number of these people in many of these different endeavors. In each project, they were pulling us forward, adding energy, and basically showing us a glimpse of what could be possible. So make sure your endeavors have people like this in them. You're going to need it to get over the hurdles when they go. A few final lessons I learned along the way. Don't be stingy with the stock, right? You've all heard the small part of a big pie is better than all of an empty tin. You should consider UNC as a partner who already has put a stake in you, and so should probably deserve a stake in your endeavor. And it's helpful to be able to say UNC is a small stake in this company because the University of Russ Taylor actually has no cachet. But do be stingy with your time. It's a great temptation, as we do in research, to try to optimize everything at once, to try to chase down every possible path. But remember the time multiplier, and remember that you're going to be lucky if you can finish one thing before you run out of money. Finally, find advisors with experience. Hire them and listen to them, because experience beats cleverness every time. Right? In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So I'd like to accept this award on behalf of my partners mentioned above. It's been a great time working with you guys. It's been a blast. And on behalf of the hundreds of members of the UNC research teams and all the employees at Megawatt Solar. I'd also like to give special thanks to several groups at UNC, the Departments of Computer Science, Physics and Astronomy, Applied Physical Sciences, the College of Arts and Sciences, and Office of Technology Development. RENCI's Launchpad launched the Venture Kickstart, and Don Rose were all heavily involved in getting Rheomics up and going. Thanks to Trudy Amick and Tim Quigg for helping negotiate the waters along the way. Special thanks to Nick England, Mary Whitten, Jim Lamont, and Greg Hunt. To the federal agencies who funded the research that kind of spun off a lot of the development that happened here. Special thanks to my family and friends. I know Cindy and Big Bill and Joseph are here somewhere. Brandon and Bryce and Mom and Tom, hi on the video. And most of all, I thank Jesus. It turns out if you haven't met him, you're really missing out. My part in all of this was to wander from place to place, catching the blessings that were falling from heaven. Yes, Shelley really did take these pictures, and thank you for your attention.